So we're going to be reacting to my 2022 pre-season power rankings. Don't roast me too hard, chat, please. I beg of you. I know they're bad, but I didn't know any better. It should be fun. I'll make sure to kind of pause in between to give you an idea of what I was thinking. And, you know, we can also take a general idea of how some of these rankings went. We can kind of compare it to how teams finish in the standings, and we'll go from there. So yeah, let's get started. My rankings. With lengthy intros aside, let's get into this. And kicking us off at the number 20 spot is the Los Angeles Valiant. I honestly just don't know what to think of them, you know? Right off the bat, we're not exactly starting in the greatest spot. I mean, the Valiant were the worst team in APAC, but they definitely were not the number 20 team in the league. You could argue maybe like bottom 5 if you wanted to, but they're definitely not the worst team. That kind of just goes without saying. They were extremely competitive this year, which kind of surprised me. I didn't really like the roster that much on paper. It seemed a little scattered, but they did pretty all right for themselves. I think this ranking could have been worse, but it definitely wasn't very good. As a reminder, the Eternal finished in 20th. They won just a single game compared to the Valiant, who won, what was it, 7 games, I believe? Yeah, Valiant won 7 games. And then the teams that had less wins, or that had, less points than them were Vancouver, alexyOWL, and Eternal. So Valiant were technically the 4th worst team record-wise, or point-wise, if you want to go there. So not the worst in the world, but obviously they were nowhere close to the bottom team. Eternal were just so much worse. Like, they're better than last year and everything, but that's nothing to brag about. They pretty much had the worst year of all time in 2021. This is true. Having an improved roster only required a small bit of effort, so you've ensured you do have a fighting chance of not going winless this year. Which they didn't. How much further can you take it, though? Can Quite a bit. Actually not be the worst team in APAC? And well, they were the worst team in APAC, but they had a fighting chance of making play-ins in their credit. A possibility. Do you feel great about their odds and them as a whole? Nope. No, definitely not. Improvement or not, it's still an average-looking roster at best. Places like support and tank feel very up in the air. That's for sure. Like and you have to remember, this was before they got Marvel as well, so I was like even less confident in them just having Sashin as a tank. Going to lack consistency. Their level of play very much might depend on the day. The Valiant just don't have enough star power to scare you. Even through the improvements, they're still bottom half of the league no matter what. Well, that much is true. There's a chance they could come in 20th yet again. On to number 19, where I just for my final comment, I guess, I mean, that last part about how it depended on the day with them was kind of true. They had their hot streaks, you know? And I give them credit. There were a lot of close map 5s, and if they had taken some of them, maybe they're the ones to make the play-ins over, like, Chengdu or whoever. Sasha and the break player. Have the London Spitfire. Oh boy, here it is. The London Spitfire don't give off much confidence at all. No one tell him what's gonna happen here. Oh no, he doesn't know, chat. This one's bad. I know they made a lot of changes and they've got new coaching, some exciting things are going on, but they still fall way short of the benchmark. They do not have that killer instinct or guaranteed star power that you are desperately looking. Okay, so in all fairness, in my defense, after what happened in 2021, this team wasn't exactly looking promising. In my defense, Hadi played a lot better than I thought he would. Sparker improved and played more towards the potential that we knew he had. Backbone was like a solid pickup. Their back line was pretty decent as well. I just, like, on paper, like, I felt like they didn't have any star players. Maybe I should have put more faith in them, sure, but after what I saw last year, I really just didn't have any hopes. Looking for if you're a London fan. They've got a whole bunch of, well, okay pieces. Without any real hard carries or stars, you're being put at a disadvantage. I mean, even some of the weaker teams in the West have a guy or two that you consider to be an X factor. And this ended up being really false. Hadi and Sparker were both X factors. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, they were star players. Hadi, I mean, they literally built their entire game plan around him. He won a Roll Star Award, so that couldn't be any further from the truth. And Sparker was just a really, really good hit scan player. So this was just totally false. I didn't give them enough credit. I really didn't. A lot of credit has to go to Christopher. He coached this team big time into a lot better of a shape than they could have been, I think. And also, I saw someone ask, where did London end? So I had them 19, right? And they finished 6th place in North America with 16 points. And in general, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams finished ahead of them. So they're, like, record-wise or point-wise, they were in the top half of the league. And I had them 19th. So to say I slept on them would be an absolute understatement.
London don't have any of that. A good number of their guys have so much to prove. DPS is shaping up to be really important, and London just don't have that guy. And think about the weird situation the support line is in. The
and again, they proved me wrong.
So many inconsistencies and weird questions that we have to answer with them.
And all of them were answered. Like, just genuinely, they're a good team. They're actually a good team.
And they're so lackluster overall. I'm hoping to be wrong, but
and I was very much wrong.
Least competitive teams in the league, rolling into the number 18 spot.
Okay, so that was, that couldn't have been more further from the truth. They were extremely competitive, not like top tier, but they're damn good. I'd say that's a pretty drastic change. It's one of my worst ever predictions in the preseason of a power rankings. I had 19. I had them at 19th, and they were, like, top 8 record-wise. Like, that is a giant jump, and it's one of my worst ever rankings, along with, like, 2020 Paris and Valiant.
Is the Vancouver Titans. I perceive
the
Titans...
so 18 for the Titans, I mean, isn't that bad? This one isn't horrible. It's actually accurate. Because Paris had the worst record, followed by New York. Then Vancouver had the 3rd least amount of points, and that's 18th. Because the Valiant had 7, so this is actually a spot-on placement, surprisingly. I mean, it's not saying much, because most people thought the Titans would be awful. But, hey, I'll take it.
As somebody who has a chance to slightly surpass expectations. The only problem is, the chance is incredibly small. While I appreciate the Titans starting from scratch and all, they didn't exactly do a great job.
Can we just take a moment to look at this? Like, how much their team changed in such a short amount of time. They got rid of Psycho. He was just gone. They got rid of Shockwave. They replaced False with Mirror as their new starting tank player. They got King. So much stuff changed.
A team with quite a few unproven talents doesn't get you excited. The good news, though, is the rebuild definitely has a different feel from the last one. They're starting over, but this time they do have some decent and proven talent at a couple of places.
Which is true.
Shockwave and Aspire make for a crazy 1-2 punch at damage.
Or so we thought.
These two have easily held their own so far in their careers, and they could low-key sneak up on some people and help the Titans get a couple of wins.
I mean, Aspire did.
Have to remember they signed Masa, who's going to help a lot here as well.
Okay, he did not.
His leadership and his experience could pay huge dividends for a team that's so young, and
that was not true. That's for sure. Masa was very quiet this year. Not all his fault. I think he was losing motivation during this year, but didn't really play well at all, to be honest with you.
That's on top of his impressive skill set and championship level experience. The issue is, the rest of the roster is so unproven at this level.
Which was true.
The Titans possess a lot of interesting pieces, but it's not enough to warrant a placement outside of the bottom tier.
Yep.
There's a chance they could be one of the better teams at this level, but that's kind of where you draw the line.
Indeed.
Anyway, as we move on, next we have the Guangzhou Charge.
Okay, so I feel like the first half of the season, this was looking pretty good. But then they really turned it up a notch in the second half. I mean, overall, they still did finish somewhat low. They had 10 points. They weren't 17 at all. I mean, like, the Valiant were worse, Chengdu were worse, Eternal, and YXL, and Vancouver, and technically, okay, so just 5 teams. Boston had the same amount of points, but a better map differential. So I was pretty close with them. They're 16th? Like, that's not that bad.
My biggest issue with the Charge is they failed to make the huge upgrades they desperately needed.
Well,
Despite
at the time,
a rough 2021 season, there was definitely a foundation to build around thanks to Krong, Eileen, and Choi Se-wan. If they managed to get another star or two during the offseason, their future could have been rather bright.
And I mean, hey, to their defense, they changed what wasn't working. They got Xerneas, they got Jimmy, And, like, the results speak for themselves. They looked a lot better. They got Piggy as well. So, honestly, this isn't that bad of a take. They weren't good at the time, and they made the proper improvements to have a strong second half of the year.
Some of their new guys maybe are getting a little underestimated here. They failed to sign anybody that gives you that guaranteed talent that gets you excited. Molly and Unique feel just okay, with the potential to be something, but you're not getting your hopes up. And after 3 years, they still have Rio, who has been nothing more than average the last couple of years.
Oh god, I'm such a Rio hater. He's so mid, dude. I'm sorry. But yeah, they did get rid of him, at least.
If you primarily play Krong, wouldn't it be better to sign a new and refreshing tank to back him up
You
rather
think
than
so?
the same old, same old? On top of that, I'm not entirely sure if the hit scan situation is forever solved. The
No,
charge
not
could
at all.
be decent if they piece it together, but in their current state, there's just too many what-ifs to call them a solid
Develop
team.
was a
Next
disaster.
up, we have the Boston Uprising. I feel like they made some improvements in some aspects, and yet they still appear to be a step or two behind the competition. Adding Stryker was a major plus for them, and that support line of theirs looks pretty impressive.
Okay, so like I was just saying, like it's like the same thing as Guangzhou, where I'm like a spot off with Boston's placement. Not the worst thing in the world. However, my take on why I thought they'd be decent was pretty far from the truth, considering Stryker up and left after like a few weeks.
But that only makes up a fraction of their team. That tank situation of theirs is bizarre. To pick up a third tank right before the start of the
This
year
was
gives me
part
some
of my
bad
concern,
vibes.
yep.
Not a single team, aside from them, have a 3 full-time tank system. And it's not like any of their tanks are amazing either.
This, I don't think I realized how accurate this really was at the time. The struggle of not playing Punk and going with the tanks that they did. It kind of was a struggle for them for a while until they realized, hey, we should really play Punk full time.
Punk is respectable, but not groundbreaking. Marvel might be washed at this point. We really don't know.
He wasn't washed.
We have no idea what to expect from him, and even then, he just seems like he'll be okay.
Yep.
Then whoever plays next to Stryker at DPS is kind of in a similar situation, where you don't know if to trust them or not.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that Stryker's magic is going to be enough to save this roster.
Yeah, the magic is what made him leave the team. Oh my god, that's hilarious. Yeah, I think the DPS was a concern. Valentine and Victoria weren't anything special. Tank was weird until they finally played Punk full time, and support was like okay.
The team has decent playmaking potential and everything, but they look and feel like an incomplete roster.
And that's what they were.
They're not well-rounded enough to be noticeably better than last year.
Yep.
Number 15, the Florida Mayhem.
Okay, yeah, this one, I definitely slept on them. Like, I almost put them higher when I was making these rankings, but I, like, went against it because I wasn't entirely convinced still. This one isn't very good, though, on my part, for sure. This one's on me. They were definitely a lot better than what I initially thought. Someone proved to be even better than anticipated. Hydron was really good. Checkmate also really shocked me. And, Majed also is pretty darn good. Yeah, we haven't even gotten to Paris yet. This is a big L placement. Florida ended up placing in the top 10, just to let you know, chat. They amassed 15 points, which was good enough for 7th place in North America. And they were far better than the teams that were below them, I'd say. And I mean, other than that, I was just a little worried after they got rid of their old core, but it ended up being the best possible move they could have made.
What an interesting case the Mayhem are proving to be. The offseason has seen them steadily improve. The last few weeks in particular have seen them make a lot of adjustments, both
Yeah,
in
see, this
support
is what I was
and
talking
DPS,
about.
which ultimately means that the season could go a bit more in their favor than initially anticipated. The Mayhem don't necessarily terrify you, but they might be on the rise.
And I mean, that was partially true. I just didn't give them enough credit.
Their new rookies provide a good bit of promise.
Which
I've
they most
especially
certainly
heard a lot
did.
of noise about someone
Someone in Hydron and RuPaul and Majed were all crazy.
emerging as a dominant tank player, and with Exy around, the DPS carry potential is through the roof.
I mean, that's what I thought, but he ended up not being important at all on this team, man.
Florida have some great-looking pieces, and rumor has it they're doing somewhat decently in scrims, which ultimately has me second-guessing the idea of them being bottom 3 in North America.
Which was, I guess,
far
right.
from elite until proven otherwise. My excitement for their rebuild has slowly grown, but there's way too many question marks to call them a legit team. Specifically, I have no clue what to expect at support. This aspect of...
Okay, pause here. At the time, Majed was having visa issues and we weren't sure when he was going to play. So my assumption at the time was Kareev was going to play flex support because he was a support player on their team at the time. Just for some context.
Team seems like it could end up struggling. Animo and Kareev simply aren't in their primes anymore. This isn't 2019. Their synergy's gonna be good, but their skill level might not be good enough. And it's not like you feel any better about Sir Majed. But even so, you should still be keeping a close eye on the Mayhem. The hype has been building quite a bit, and I think they generally might be in for a surprise year.
I mean, that was right. I just was very, very, very off with where I ended up placing them.
Number 14, the Hangzhou Spark.
Yeah, another one where I really underestimated a team. I just wasn't that excited about the Spark. I felt like nothing had really changed. I did not like their coaching. They ended up placing where exactly? Valiant had more points. Chengdu, Guangzhou, that's 3 teams. 4, 5, 6, 7 teams. So they finished about 8 places up. So what were they, like 11th, I think? Hangzhou were like 12 or 11th. Why does it say Hong Kong Spark? I have no idea, to let you know. Yeah, they're like top 12, so this wasn't that far off. It's just like, they had some really good peaks, you know? They had some really, really strong peaks, which is the thing that differentiates like my placement compared to like how good they actually did, because they had a couple of really good runs. Mid-season madness, you know, first half of the season in general, playoffs. That was like the big issue. If they didn't find that success, I'd say this placement was more justified.
This team is a curious case. On the surface, they feel like the same team as last year. They've got a lot of players. Unlike last year, though, the firepower seems to be a bit stronger all around. We know what Shy's capable of at this point, so that gives them a guaranteed star. And the good news about this year is they have even more help at DPS, as alphaYi and Pineapple should bolster the rotation quite a bit.
And that was true. I mean, mostly alphaYi, but he was a really good player next to Shy for the most part.
Necessary changes at support also gives them more of a
The
fighting
support
chance.
line wasn't that good, though.
There's one problem, though. Their coaching still doesn't feel amazing.
Yeah.
Head coach Changgun is not my favorite. In fact, I criticized him quite a bit during his Dynasty days. The Spark already had a messy coaching situation last year as it is, so this doesn't help them.
This was my ultimate fear with Hangzhou. I was like, oh god, they have Changgun as their coach. There's just no way they can win, right? No shot. But they proved me wrong. They had the classic Changgun BS happen to them, you know, where they play good randomly at the most random times and go on runs.
I would have preferred if they signed a more stable option. I like the Spark, but I also dislike them. They're a very middle-of-the-road team. Very deep, with maybe a few holes, but also a coach that makes me believe they will be wildly inconsistent.
I mean, that is pretty true. They were wildly inconsistent. I'll give myself that for the time. First half of the season, all the way up here. Second half of the season, way down here. Playoffs, all the way up here.
I wouldn't put it past the Spark to maybe sneak into the playoffs, but don't get your hopes up at number 13.
Yeah, you should have gotten your hopes up.
You've got the Paris Eternal.
Oh, here it comes. Oh my god, I'm so wrong about Paris. Oh my god, they're so bad. They were so bad. They were terrible. It's one of the worst seasons of all time. I can't believe how much they let me down. I was so excited after how they played in 2021. They're a real exciting underdog. They still have the same team. I liked their coaching. I thought that, what's-his-face was good, J-Mac. I thought they had a real shot of being decent, but then I felt like things fell apart before it even really got started. They struggled, releases kept happening, and things just spiraled out of control. I think it could have been worse, but 13th is not good. I had a lot of praise for them. I really liked their, people within their org. Maybe that blinded me a little, but what can you do?
What to say about the Eternal? On one hand, there's reason to feel skeptical about them. Their offseason
If only I
wasn't
knew.
amazing by any means. On the other hand, their roster is still pretty respectable. In a sense, they could be exactly the same as last year, but with more potential. There are 3 reasons why this could be the case. For one, they made a nice move at DPS by acquiring Glister.
He was gone before we even knew it. That was part of the problem. I was very high on Glister, and he was just gone. Didn't work out, you know? Yeah, Paris's one win came against New York in a map 5, so they barely won a game this season. They just barely avoided being the next winless team. Yeah, losing Get Amazed definitely hurt them more than I thought.
Second of all, their coaching might be even better than last year, which could lead to even better strategies.
Nope, it was even worse.
And mid-game adjustments. Thirdly, their synergy and general confidence could be even greater. You've got to keep in mind that guys like Vestola and Dridro, they joined the team mid-season last year.
Which I think is fair
Now
to
that they've
say.
spent more time with their teammates, their play could see a notable spike. Honestly, this might apply to everyone in general, though. Just the fact that they're all together in person this year should lead to a tighter-knit group who trust each other more in critical situations.
I mean, that might have been true, but they never really had a chance to get in those critical situations because they were bad, and their whole team exploded. If I had known things were this bad internally, there's no way I'd ever put them this high. They literally lost their entire team before the season even ended. Everyone that was on the 2022 roster at the start was not there by the finish.
How I see it is, the Eternal aren't a crazy threat, but they're respectable. They're like mid-tier. They
Not
won't
at
blow
all.
your socks off, but they probably won't be bottom tier either.
Oh, if only he knew, Chad. If only he knew. They're literally the worst.
Number 12, the New York Excelsior.
There's another ugly one. There we go. We're getting the pain out of the way here. Another really, really bad one. Back to back. The 2 worst teams in the league back to back. And I had them 13 and 12. The 2 worst teams.
I want to believe that this is New York's year, like so bad. Their DPS line just gets you so hyped. You gotta love Yaki and Flora. That's a superstar duo if they click.
I mean, no. Flora, for the most part, wasn't that great. Yaki wasn't even that great either at times.
And in a situation where DPS is very critical, that could mean that they carry their team on a regular basis. Honestly,
They
though,
tried.
even from a general standpoint, the NYXL just have some ridiculous mechanical talent. This team...
I mean, I think that part is true, you know? They did have a decent bit of talent on paper. They had, you know, Kellen at the time had a lot of high praise. He didn't really get the support he needed, but he was praised pretty highly in contenders. Flora was coming off a great year. We still thought pretty highly of Yaki. Gangnam Jin, I think a lot of people liked him as well. It just didn't work out.
team seems very promising on the surface. However, recent events have me reconsidering.
And I should have reconsidered even harder.
Pick up a Vulcan who isn't even Korean just makes me feel so weird. It's no disrespect to Vulcan, he's genuinely a good player. On this team though, yeah, he feels kind of out of place. Communication is going to be awkward for sure, and seeing as the tank usually does a lot of the shot calling, that makes it especially weird.
Yeah, I mean, this didn't even end up coming into fruition. He never played, unsurprisingly.
All this signing does is make me wonder if Kellen is good enough. My assumption is that the NYXL were having some trouble during scrims, but they
Probably.
didn't want to risk signing somebody who needed time to get their visa approved.
Maybe.
As a result, they're in a very weird spot. And if that wasn't enough, there's question marks on that support line for sure. Can we really expect Gangnam Jin and or Myungbong to play main support at an adequate level?
The answer to this is a hard no.
It's hard to say. They're both
Hey, Wes.
incredible players, so maybe there is a chance they figure it out. But the lack of confirmation is a serious problem. If that wasn't enough, here in the early stages of the year, apparently their synergy is kind of divided, which has led to some disappointing results. All of these factors combined keep me from having the maximum confidence in a team that could honestly be really good. I think they could get better as time goes on at least, though. They were a bit late to arrive in North America, I believe, and their potential is through the roof. New York could be excellent, and I recognize their talent.
Excellent is very much of a stretch. But yeah, the fact that I had 2 awful picks back to back like this makes me want to throw up. You know, 13 and 12 or whatever it was, back to back, and these are the worst 2 teams in AL 2022. Like, yikes, man, yikes. Like, that's a huge difference. Like, we're talking 10 plus spots for both of them.
But right now, all the rumors state that they're kind of in a weak position. I'm expecting a decent year out of this crew when it's all said and done, but until further notice, they are not a supreme threat.
Yeah, they weren't a supreme threat, and that goes for the whole year, not just the beginning of the year.
Number 11, the Washington Justice.
Okay. So, Justice were middle of the pack, so I don't think this was the most awful thing. I just placed them a little too high. Because they finished above 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 teams, give or take. So they were pretty middle of the pack, just a little too high. They're 13th, yeah, so not the worst in the world. I think I maybe put a bit too much faith in Decay. That was like my one issue.
I've got to admit that I'm a little disappointed. After a year that was largely a letdown, they failed to make a lot of meaningful upgrades.
That's true.
Now, of course, with this being a new game and all, there's a chance they do a lot better. Somebody like Decay could run rampant in a new game where he's more enabled than ever before. When looking at the big picture, though, the Justice fall flat. Their support line did not get enough attention. Vigilante, I think that he could be noticeably better than Bebe.
Which he was.
The problem is, he isn't turning 18 until 2 months after the start of...
Also, even though he was noticeably better than Bebe, it was on the land terrain, not really Washington. Yeah, also to my credit, you're kind of right, chat. Washington did kind of explode before the season even ended, so, I mean, there's no way I could really know that.
This year, which leaves the Justice in a weird spot with Krillin and Opener, who both leave a lot to be desired.
Which was
if
true.
That wasn't enough. There's no telling if Happy and Assassin will be consistent enough to give Decay the proper backup he needs.
I mean, Happy was pretty good. I'd say Happy was the most consistent he's ever been this year. So, definitely wrong on that end. And Assassin wasn't the worst either when he played a little bit.
At the very least, Mag and Kalios are pieces who could definitely hold their own alongside Decay. The only problem is, only one of them can play at once, you know?
And Kalios wasn't even that good when he got to play.
That sucks. While I do think the team will get better after Vigilante becomes eligible, by then it might already be too late.
It was too late, but not in the way I knew.
Let's say the best case scenario happens. Well, yeah, in that case the Justice could be very respectable. In the end, though, I still don't view them much higher than I did by the end of last year.
Yeah, Kalios is on Boston.
Kicking off the top half of the
okay,
power
here we go,
rankings
number 10.
is the Toronto Defiant. It's a new year.
It's not that bad. I mean, Toronto's not that bad. Are they? They're like just out of the top 10, I think. Right? I think they're like 11th place, I want to say. Or maybe 12th, something like that. This wasn't that bad. Welcome, Minnie. Welcome to the stream. I thought it was pretty fair to place them 10th, knowing that they're always mid. I think I may have rated them a bit too high based off of what I heard in scrim results. Maybe I would have placed them like a spot or two lower had I, you know, not been that crazy. But not a horrible placement.
Here, ladies and gentlemen, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for Toronto to make a new roster again. Yay! Woohoo! Is
still
this
a tradition.
That they finally do something, though?
Not really.
In theory, this could end up being their best roster of all time.
And I think so far it kind of has been. We'll see what happens next year. But as of right now, this was their best roster of all time.
Main reason I'm stating this is due to the obvious strength at support. Twilight and Charong could be one of the best backlines right from day one.
And they were pretty good.
Twilight has been one of the best in the game for years now, and Charong, he's one of the top rookies in his class. If these two figure it out, the Defiant could be scary. The only problem is, it's hard to say if the rest of their roster holds up outside of Hisu.
And I mean, some of those pieces were a little weird outside of Hisu. Like, the backline did fine, but Muse wasn't that great. I think the Finale, although flex DPS situation was also a little weird, which is why I was skeptical about them at the time. So yeah.
For starters, their other DPS don't look amazing, and one is currently having visa issues, which means that Toronto feels pretty stuck here.
Yep.
At tank, Hoppa could go either way, and Muse, while he could be good, still has a little bit to prove before you feel 100% confident in him.
And he wasn't able to prove himself, and Hoppa was actually surprisingly decent. He was way better than I expected. He was somewhat reliable, I'd say, overall.
On paper, this team doesn't feel extremely special, but the thing is, they're apparently doing quite well right now in scrims.
Like I was saying before.
Like, they could possibly end up being top 5 in NA if they continue to play this way.
And they most certainly were not. They were top 8 NA. Had the same amount of points as Florida, but worse because of map differential.
These rumors, along with my confidence in the backline, are ultimately why I rate the Toronto Defiant as high as I do. However, when you compare them to like the top of the line rosters, they clearly do come up short no matter what.
That's for sure.
They needed another big piece or two to seriously break the mold. With that DPS and tank line, it's going to be hard to see them winning a tournament or going on a deep playoff run.
The fact that they did well in one tournament, though, kind of surprised us.
They're good, but not so much great. Number 9. The Chengdu Hunters.
Yeah, okay. Context. This was before they got rid of alexyOWL, as well as like a couple of other guys. I think Farway as well. This is when the rumor was just that a lot of their guys were going to be on the bench full time since they're looking to sell them. So I still thought they'd be okay. You know, maybe they'd figure it out. But then they lost a bunch of people. They lost to Prita as well. It was like 3 or 4 players, right? This was right before it happened. Like, I think I made this rankings like maybe like a week before that Chengdu news came out of like not their transfers, but their releases. So it's pretty rough. Pretty rough.
What an interesting predicament this team is in. If you weren't aware, their parent company is in a tough spot. They're down bad.
Yeah, they were down so bad that I probably didn't do it justice with this placement.
Like really, really bad. From Valentine's Day until the present, they're down a staggering 86%. As a result, the Hunters have been scrambling to clear up money and are likely dealing with a minimal lineup. While it's unclear who goes and who stays, this obviously is going to suck if you're the Chengdu Hunters.
This was an understatement. They literally had like one backup.
According to Halo of Thoughts of Dexerto, it has already been confirmed that both alexyOWL and Prita will be benched as the Hunters find a way to clear their contracts off the books. That immediately puts this team in a rough spot as they're losing out on a ton of star power and flexibility. If there's any good news for Chengdu fans, it's that Leaf will be staying for the upcoming year. But now the Hunters have a weaker overall team to give him less resources, which
Okay, yeah, I think maybe I put too much trust in Leaf to just carry the rest of the team when that just wasn't going to happen, to be honest with you. I was so stoked about how he played in 2021.
Which means that Leaf is going to have to put the team on his back even more than last year,
and he just
which
couldn't.
Is clearly a problem. I originally had the Hunters as my number 2 team in APAC and top 5 overall in the league. I can't say that anymore, though. They could still be respectable, but even right now, as I'm making this video, I still have thoughts that I'm probably overrating them, but I can't.
Yeah, I mean, you were right, past ATP. You most certainly were overrating them because they were second to last in APAC, and they only amassed 9 points on the year, which is only better than 4 other teams in the league. So yeah, definitely could have done even better with ranking them. I was on the fence and I should have listened to my gut.
Can't resist since they still do have Leaf and everything. But here's how I see it. Jinmu's the full-time starter in a new game could be tough, as while Genji is looking to be strong, I don't really know if he's going to be consistently reliable depending on the meta.
This was true.
Support also appears to be a pretty confusing mess, which only makes the situation even more bizarre.
Yeah, I think losing out on alexyOWL, now known as Zerny, has hurt them a lot. He was definitely their better main support player, without a doubt.
Chengdu could have been so much more. It's such a sad sight to behold. Welp, at this point, there's only one thing left to say. Welcome back to the Chengdu zone. Moving on to the number 8 spot, I have the Philly Fusion.
Oh, man, I could have done better here. 8th isn't horrible, though, luckily. Because at 15 points, they were kind of right there with a lot of teams, you know?
Team feels like the classic example of a good but not great roster.
Rip Fusion,
overall,
by the way.
The Fusion are somewhat likable. Their revamped DPS line could take them a long way in Overwatch 2. The mechanical talent of NM3, Carpe, and Zest could lead to a
Side note, I just said NM3 instead of MN3. Nice.
lot of crazy moments. The tank line also seems to be in pretty decent shape, seeing as Philly recently got a second option to make them feel pretty well-rounded here. However, I'm a little unsure of how things go at support ultimately. It's true that this position is generally less valuable as it currently stands, but if you compare them to some of the top level backlines in the league, they clearly fall short. At a playoff level and during big situations where they might have to clutch up, my trust in them is pretty minimal.
Yeah, Rip Diffusion, by the way, now known as Infernal, but I think that was pretty true. Fixa and Aim God were definitely like a weaker aspect of this team. I also maybe underestimated the inconsistency of Tank. Fury definitely took a step in the wrong direction. Abel's Rhea had his moments, but pretty inconsistent. It felt like it was Zest and MN3 or bust a lot of the time, and maybe I didn't quite see that coming.
It may not be a huge problem during the regular season at least, seeing as APAC feels pretty wide open outside of Shanghai, which is why I'm kind of convinced that Philly could still have a decent year, but not an amazing one.
And I think that was pretty true. I mean, they went to a tournament finals. They got a top 4 finish in midseason madness. They made playoffs. They were good, but not great. I think that's pretty accurate.
My expectations aren't high, but they're not exactly low either. Number 7. The Houston Outlaws.
Honestly, I'm pretty proud of this. 7th ain't that bad for Houston. Like, they were right around that spot. I mean, they're what, like 6th, I want to say? 6th place? So, pretty good. Some people were maybe a little low on Houston, because at the time, we didn't know Dante was going to be their tank. And Piggy was their lone tank at the time. So there was a bit of concern there, but I was pretty excited about Houston. I'm glad that they actually did something.
This is a team that could go either way. They more than have the talent to go far. In terms of their talent, they boast one of the strongest DPS lines in the league, especially if Merit develops into a solid hit scan.
Which he most certainly did. It's just Dante didn't play DPS like I thought. That was the only real difference.
And if Piggy picks up where he left off in his rookie year...
Shouldn't rankings go off playoffs, not regular season? No, I did these power rankings based off of regular season standings. I don't think it's fair to do it off of playoffs. I don't think it makes any sense. Because that's not how you ever do it in traditional sports. Then that's kind of how I look at it. Regular season standings for me. I don't care about playoff finish.
Houston could be gross on just about every major place. The only problem is, there's a lot we don't know still. First of all, we have no idea how Piggy does as the only tank on his team.
Welp, he wouldn't stay on there for long, and Dante would be their tank, which, I mean, no one saw coming.
And we also don't know if Merit is going to pan out the way that Houston hopes he does. But most importantly, their support line is very confusing. The idea of either Iris or Lastro playing main support hurts my brain. With Lucio appearing to be one of the strongest supports in Overwatch 2, that could be an issue. Houston have a high ceiling, but they may not reach it due to not having the right meta coming their way.
And I mean, they're pretty flexible. I was kind of incorrect in that regard. Lastro proved to me that he could be a decent main support at the Overwatch League level. His Lucio could have been better, but it certainly wasn't the worst. His Brigitte was pretty strong. I think Lastro did a fine job given the circumstances.
It should still be noted, though, that Houston should be pretty good this year no matter what. This team is very capable of going on a run, concerns or not. Number 6, the Atlanta Reign. Okay,
hold pause. Houston were pretty capable of going on a run, but even more so than I thought. This is where I'm like a little upset with myself, though. This is, again, me trusting in the scrim bucks too much. I heard Atlanta were doing really, really good in scrims. And, you know, the year before, I decided not to trust in scrim rumors. Atlanta did good in scrims, and then they made grand finals the year before. So I'm like, maybe I should listen to them for once. And I very much regret it. Because while they were top 10... they most certainly were not closer to the top half. They were 7th place overall, which isn't the worst, but it doesn't feel like they should be ranked this high at all.
Technically, I did not project the Reign to finish this high in the standings during my team preview video, but I've kind of had a change of heart because
which I shouldn't
to the Hunter
have.
situation and the Reign supposedly performing well in scrims, I'm ready to once again think of them as one of the better teams in NA. Even through the loss of Pelican, they still seem to be holding their own. Kai seems to be adjusting well, as he's playing more at that superstar level we saw from him in 2020.
He was, but then he kind of fell off a little in the second half of the season.
And when you combine his efforts with Hawk, who's still playing well apparently, a promising new support line who are also playing well, and some interesting rookies at DPS.
Yeah, essentially I had Houston and Atlanta swapped. Yeah, it's a good way of saying it.
Atlanta appear to have a pretty competitive team. I kind of learned my lesson with this franchise after last year. If they're doing good in scrims, I should probably take them seriously. And what's scary is, they can reasonably only keep on getting better as their rookies continue to develop, and when Speedily turns 18 later this year.
I think my issue is it felt like in the second half of the year, they didn't feel like that team that they're projected to be. That's kind of why I feel like this ranking is worse than it should be, even though I only missed by 1. Because in the first half, they showed so much potential with 2 really good high tournament finishes. And then after that, we kind of just stopped talking about them for the most part. And then they flopped in the playoffs, and that was it.
I still don't know if I'm ready to consider them a top 3 team in NA again, but they're certainly a threat to everybody around them.
They kind of were in the first half, at least.
We have none other than the San Francisco Shock.
I ended up not doing too good with this, which is weird to say because I thought putting them top 5 was pretty optimistic at the time, but they did even better. Like, wow. I was like trying to be optimistic but also cautious with the Shock because like they were young, it was a brand new team. Maybe they might not be like top 3 in the league. That might be a stretch even with Proper. They're mixed. Might not be the greatest. They might be trying to look towards the future. Maybe a tournament, or not a tournament push, a championship push wasn't in their future just yet, but I was wrong. They showed that even though they rebuilt from the ground up and had a new core, they were fine because they had Proper.
Through all of the ridiculous changes they made, San Francisco still have managed to stay relevant.
That's true.
Their new roster is full of young and exciting talent who could turn out to be superstars.
That was an understatement because of what Proper did.
They literally have Violet, plus multiple Rookie of the Year level players, if not MVP level.
Well, Proper was MVP level, so I was right on that end.
Is likely to instantly live up to the hype.
He did.
Scrim results indicate he is as good as everybody thought, which means the Shock could have a brand new superstar right off the bat.
True.
I mean, that's just at least one. That's not including Violet or somebody like Finn or Kilo, who could also be really good. This team has all the carry potential in the world.
Well, it's mostly Proper, just calling it how it is.
Drawback is, they're very young. There might be some...
Yeah, see, this is what I mean. They're young and still, I guess, slightly unproven at this level, so I was trying to be cautious. I kind of wish I didn't be cautious. But, I mean, top 5 couldn't be that bad, you know? That still means they're top tier in most people's eyes if you have them top 5, so could be worse.
Learning moments they need to undergo this year that ultimately keeps them from winning the chip. Supposedly, the Shock are still one of the best teams in the league.
Which they were.
It's better to be cautious than to go all in with such a young group. If this team is going to go far, the meta also might need to go in their favor.
That didn't really matter, to be honest. They were just good consistently, and they got better over time.
Violet, I mean, you have to remember that he's on main support this year and is still unproven.
This was another concern I completely forgot to bring up. I had no idea how Violet would do at main support. I was really, really worried, and that maybe kind of held me back a little from putting them as high as they rightfully deserved in the end.
There's no telling how things go at tank without Super and Smurf there to lead the charge. However, if these potential worries turn out to be nothing, the sky is the limit.
Yeah, that was pretty true. Those concerns weren't a problem, and the sky literally was the limit, and they were just 1 map away from winning Grand Finals. So in that aspect, good job, ATP. Just your placement was a little off.
Promise you, the Shock are someone you need to monitor because they're not going anywhere anytime soon. Number 4, the Seoul Dynasty. I like Seoul quite a bit this year. It's up for debate if they're actually the 4th best team or not.
Accurate prediction. Because I'm pretty sure they were 4th overall in the playoffs. Well, not like playoff finish, I mean playoff seeding at the start. So, hey, we take those, boys. We take those. Pretty accurate pred.
But I fully expect their record to be within this range when it's all said and done. Every team except for one feel pretty beatable for them over an APAC. They might have a small roster, but they're packing some serious heat.
Yep.
Tank and DPS both feel very nice.
Their
success might be a little meta-dependent, but I suspect that Seoul are going to show good consistency across the year. The idea of Fitz and Profit potentially being even better than last year, along with a few new...
Oh yeah, technically they were third place overall in the standings, but I remember for whatever reason in the playoffs, they had the Seoul Dynasty as the 4 seed instead of the 3 seed, and it was really, really weird. Because the Glads, I remember, picked a team before them. It was really strange. But yeah, regardless, this was still a pretty accurate prediction. It's one off, so I'll take that.
Newcomers gives me hope that the Dynasty are going to stick around come playoff time. However, please do keep in mind that there might be some question marks surrounding their ability to compete for a championship.
Which was true in the end.
They have a lot of star power going on, but they aren't as loaded as they could be. The questions at support, especially with creative, as well as how Smurf does on characters outside of his comfort zone, does kind of keep me from putting them in that 100% confident range.
I mean, to be honest with you, the meta wasn't the problem, and they literally traded creative for Iris, who I thought was, pretty good. And Smurf ended up being arguably, like, the most flexible tank in the game. So, that clearly wasn't a problem either. My man absolutely popped off and was like a top 2 tank in most people's eyes. Some people say number 1. So those concerns were just non-existent. Vindame played well. The support line did good. Profit was good. They just couldn't finish when it mattered, that's all.
I gotta say though, if these are the only concerns you're actively dealing with, maybe alongside some coaching things, it's safe to say that you're in pretty good shape.
Which they were.
The Dynasty look good. Are they good enough to win a championship this year? I'm not entirely certain.
They weren't.
Something I can promise you though is they're going to be competitive without a shadow of a doubt.
And they
Moving
were.
on to the number 3 spot, you've got the LA Gladiators.
And again, pretty good. They literally were 3rd place overall. If we're going off of point total and map differential, they were 3rd. Or 4th, excuse me. Pretty spot on. Not 3rd, 4th. But 3rd, for whatever reason, in the playoffs, which again, I don't really understand. But maybe it's because they won 2 tournaments. I don't know. But 1 spot off, not bad.
This team has a shot of picking up exactly where they left off last year and then some. You could maybe argue their skill ceiling has decreased a little bit over the offseason, but they're still in drastically better shape than a majority of the league. The Gladiators are very, very well-rounded. The support line genuinely might be the best in the league.
And it was really, really good.
They can literally play any meta to absolute perfection, and even with no bird rank...
Okay, that wasn't true, though. They most certainly could not play every meta to perfection. What we saw in the Summer Showdown was an atrocity.
Their DPS line is scary good. Kevster genuinely might end up being the MVP of the league.
He was a nomination.
And you're giving him 2 freaks of nature as his partners in crime. That has some insane potential. The only questions maybe come at tank, since Space and Reiner maybe aren't as strong compared to some of the other top teams on paper, but it's doubtful that's going to stop them from being a solid competitor.
And Reiner was like even better than I expected him to be. I mean, he won a Roll Star. I didn't think that was going to happen at all. And if it weren't for Junker Queen meta, I think most people would have praised him as just a great tank the whole season, because that's what he mostly was.
I'm in love with the LA Gladiators' flexibility and star-studded roster. They're definitely a title favorite here. Number 2.
I mean, they're a title favorite until the playoffs hit where disaster struck. But in the first half of the season, I mean, they're the front runners. They won 2 tournaments. They're looking pretty darn good.
The Dallas Fuel.
I mean, 1 spot off. Dallas had the most points in the entire league, so... Well, tied for most with Shock, but they finished number 1 overall. It's not bad.
I'd say them and the Gladiators are fairly interchangeable as of right now, but I decided to go with the hot hand, so to speak. What ultimately makes Dallas so intimidating is they're basically the same team as last year, but with even greater flexibility. They literally made improvements to an already stacked roster with 3 simple signings. I mean, the only ones that possibly could have made them better, by addressing hit scan and main support with Edison, Grillo, and Chio. There's maybe some questions to be had if their hit scans can be superstar level, but there's a good chance the team is going to play well no matter how they do, because Dallas did just fine last year without a hit scan.
So the Grillo part, obviously, he wasn't anything great, but Edison, he was a key piece in their championship run, and I was pretty high on Chio at the time. I know a lot of people love Jexay, but I always thought they could do better than Jexay, so I was really pumped when they got Chio as their new main support. So I think this was a pretty good take overall. Chio and Edison ended up being huge parts of their championship run.
If worst comes to worst, the coaching makes the necessary adjustments they need to keep on pushing forward. This team has already shown they are quite capable of fighting off adversity and finding ways to win through alternative means. And if Lucio Moira with dive tanks ends up being a thing, or we see a lot of Genji, forget about it.
I didn't even foresee the idea of like Hanbin dominating in metas that he was good in. That's just how scary they were. There were so many things they could be really, really good on.
I would be shocked if the Fuel do not stick around come playoff time. They are way too talented. And finally, to the surprise of absolutely no one, the Shanghai Dragons come in at my #1 spot.
Yeah. I usually have a habit of putting the defending champion as #1. So that's like the big reason why they make it here. But sadly, this is when they fell off, you know, their window closed. Usually it's that 2-year window where you're really good and then you drop. It happened with the Shock and it happened with them, but I thought they continue to be good. I had a lot of confidence in them and they kind of let me down. It's not the worst yikes of this video, but it's one of the more bad takes, I'd say. Seoul were the only team that were better in APAC. And then there are the Gladiators, Shock, and Fuel finished above them as well. So they were still a top 5 team. They still did have a good season and they won a tournament. It's just when the playoffs came, they were not that team we've grown accustomed to. And that was really the end. Their window closed. They had their 2 years, and that was it. Still good, though. Still good. And I think most people thought they were a contender throughout most of the year still. The most yikes part of the video is definitely New York or Paris.
They're the defending champs with the same high-level roster as last year, and it's pretty easy to make a case for them as #1.
Yeah, again, I'm really big on this idea of, you got to rank the defending champ high.
Shanghai arguably have one of the most well-rounded rosters in the entire league. And unlike a lot of their competition, there's very few concerns or question marks. You know what you're gonna get out of every single starter.
Yep.
They literally have a superstar level player at every position.
The problem was, I think maybe part of the issue was Fleta. I didn't see such a big fall off with him coming, because he really did not look the same at all. Lip, while he managed to continue improving, Fleta just, he hit his wall, so to speak. And, maybe the tank situation was a little weird at times. Fate maybe wasn't quite as strong either. So things kind of went downhill. They didn't have the loaded status of the year before. There were some notable drop-offs.
A lot of these guys could easily be MVP level. The Dragons are going to be a championship favorite. I mean, in my opinion, they are the championship favorite.
Nope,
but I suppose that's a discussion for a different day. The Dragons are well equipped to deal with most, if not all, metas and strategies that get thrown their way. They're smart, dominant, and well coached. Having the top record in the league seems very likely yet again for them.
I mean, at least they still had a top 5 record, so I think if they're out of the top 5, this would look a lot worse.
Especially due to the fact that, in my opinion, they just play in the weaker overall region.
Which is
West
true,
has more threats
kind
to them,
of, you
so
know.
they're kind of in a really good spot. And unless a massive implosion ensues, the Dragons won't be going anywhere. Their reign of superiority is likely to continue. The Dragons are really good. I don't know what else to say. So there you go. Those are my overall power rankings for the 2022 season. I'll put a recap of the rankings on the screen right about now.
Go. So, of these rankings, the absolute worst ones by far were London, Paris, and New York. I don't think anything even compares. These 3 were so drastically terrible, like it's not even funny. Because London, instead of being a bottom tier team, were literally top 6 in North America. Then you have New York and Paris, who are the 2 worst teams in all of Overwatch League. And then we also have Chengdu as another big-time shout-out. I mean, I placed them really, really high. I had them in my top 10, and they were the worst, second worst team in APAC record-wise. And only a couple of other teams had a worse amount of points overall, just the Valiant, Vancouver, New York, and Paris. So those were definitely my worst ones, I'd say. Not Vancouver, excuse me. London, Paris, New York, and Chengdu were all god-awful takes. I think the rest was pretty, okay. There are some teams that are rated a bit too high, a bit too low. I think Florida could have been a bit better too, obviously, but Not everyone I had high expectations then. So maybe those 5, I guess, then. Florida, Paris, New York, London, Chengdu. Sounds about right. The rest of it was pretty okay. I mean, Spark 2 as well, so those 6. Aside from those guys, though, I think I did pretty okay. Like, you know, you could have moved Shock a bit higher, obviously. But still top 5. Shanghai could have been lower, but they're still pretty darn good. Houston was pretty accurate. Atlanta's pretty decent. Like, in terms of just overall standings. Boston too low. Actually, Boston was pretty good for the most part. I was only a couple of spots off with Boston Uprising. Not too terrible with them. Only, like, 5 other teams did worse, so really not bad at all. Yeah. Now, the more I look at it, the more I don't hate these rankings as much as I remember. But I think that I had this was probably the rankings where I had, like, the most atrocious, like, takes overall, like, the most of them in one ranking. Because I had, like, 6 of them. And in previous videos, they haven't been as bad. Or, I guess, previous years of doing this. I'll take it, though, for what it is. I mean, considering I had no idea what to expect in a new game, I'll take it, you know? I went into this very, very blind, not knowing what was going to happen, and I'm also not an expert, and I've never claimed to be one, so I'll take having, like, 6 or 7 bad takes and the rest being pretty okay. Not bad considering nobody knows the future, and that I'm kind of an idiot. And here's what it looks like for West and East. It kind of looks worse this way, to be honest with you. Yeah, it looks a lot worse, because, like, these 3 should just be in these 4 should be in drastically different places. And then, you know, like, Hangzhou should be up, Chengdu should be down. Who is the Philadelphia Fusion? Oh, yeah. I don't know, man. It's true. They're called the Seoul Infernal now. GG's, though. Wasn't that bad. It's really cringy to look back at this, I won't lie. But I don't hate it as much as I remember. So I guess that's a somewhat good sign. I know I'm an idiot, you can roast me all you want, but at the end of the day, I had fun making this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. I'm gonna stop the recording.